Welcome back into the Daily Dose. I'm your host, Jeff Hansen. As always, the show is brought to you by Give'emHellBrigham.com and by CougarSportsInsider.com, part of the 24/7 Sports Network. I don't know, guys. It feels like I need a tagline or something here. I don't really have a tagline. Get your BYU fix by getting dosed up with us here at the Daily Dose. I don't know. Leave a comment. Give me your best taglines. Do I need a tagline? Feels like a tagline is needed here. Thank you so much for your support of the show. We appreciate what you're doing. Appreciate you guys tuning in with us every single day for the best BYU content that you can find. Please continue to do so. If you haven't yet, subscribe to the channel. Hit the subscribe button. Leave a comment. Leave us a comment telling us a tagline or telling me that I'm an idiot because the tagline is a bad idea. I don't know. But thank you for your support, and thank you for your support in the future. We have talked a ton about the new additions to the BYU roster. Everybody knows the names like Caleb Etienne and Eddie Heckard and Aiden Robbins and Keaton Slovis. We know the names that have come to BYU and have been signed out of the transfer portal, right? Deion Smith, Darius Lassiter, Keelan Marion, Isaiah Batt. It feels like we could go on forever and ever. BYU's not done, folks. They are still looking in the transfer portal, and there will still be new names that are added to this roster before fall camp. One of them took an official visit to BYU last week, a punter from Pitt, Sam Vanderhaar. He visited BYU on an official visit capacity. He was there with everybody else last week, and he's taking a look at what BYU has to offer. I didn't have punter at the top of my punch list of things that BYU needed to do. Ryan Ricow is still on the roster. He's still very good. But hey, if you can get a guy like Vanderhaars, maybe you bring him in. He sits for a year behind Ricow, gives you some added depth, and he takes over after Ricow leaves because Ricow is old. He's been around for a while. Maybe he leaves after this year. And then you turn to a proven punter in Vanderhaars. He's from Australia. He's got that Aussie style punting method. He's a pretty productive punter. I don't really like to talk about punters a ton, so we're going to move on pretty quickly, but BYU is still looking at a punter. And to those of you who have asked, my gosh, I've been inundated with questions about kickers. I don't know. I am a little bit surprised that BYU has not added a kicker out of the transfer portal. That said, I also think the kicking woes of spring ball are maybe a little overstated. I think that between Will Farron and Matthias Dunn, I think BYU's got guys that will work. I don't think there is anybody who's great. And I do think that there's going to be times that BYU wishes they had a better kicker on the roster. But I also think there's going to be a lot more times where just the analytics say go for it on fourth down. And I don't think BYU or anybody in general is going to be kicking with the frequency that they once were. So kicking and punting, BYU is looking at another punter. We're seeing that. We know that. And they're not evidently looking at another kicker, so we'll see what that means. But we're not here to talk about special teams. Sorry to Moose Bingham, to Johnny Linehan, to all of those kickers out there. We're not going to invest any more time into punting and kicking than we already have. BYU is still looking at adding new bodies to the roster that play other positions. Simi Moala is a name that we've talked about a bunch. It feels like maybe one of the worst kept secrets in Provo, but Simi Moala has been lurking around the BYU program since spring ball, former University of Utah offensive tackle. Rumor has it that he will be added to the roster this fall. And what do I think of that? I think that that's a great addition. If Simi Moala is in shape, he's ready to play, he's a valuable piece of depth for that offensive line. He'll push the starters. He'll push guys like Etienne because he's good enough that he could potentially take some playing time away from them. I look at the addition of Moala as kind of how what it was like when BYU re-added Keanu Saleapaga a couple of years ago. Saleapaga had been off of the team, and then they re-added him to the roster for spring ball. And it was kind of a big story for the moment, but then after spring ball, Saleapaga ended up not playing that year at BYU for whatever reason. I don't even know what the reason was, but he didn't play. And I look at Simi Moala's situation, and I see a lot of similarities. Moala left Utah a couple of years ago. He actually signed with Jackson State last year. He did not play at all in 2022. Obviously, he didn't enroll at Jackson State. And now he's here. He's looking to maybe join the BYU roster, and it sounds like he will. So what do you expect from a contribution standpoint? Nothing. But you should have zero expectations for Simi Moala. and then allow him to exceed those expectations when he gets here. Anything you get from him is a bonus. That's not to say you should have zero expectations because he's not talented. He's plenty talented. It's just been a long time since he's played football. He's going into an offensive line room that is pretty deep, and he hasn't played within Darryl Funk and the Aaron Roderick scheme. That's a big hill to climb for a guy who's been removed for football for the last year plus of his life. So I wouldn't expect much, but if he does contribute, he's talented enough. If he figures it out, if he's in shape, if he's ready to roll, great. But I wouldn't expect a whole lot from Simi Moala, although that will be a pretty big story if and when he is officially added to the roster. Another name, Sione Moa from Utah State, a linebacker formerly at Weber High. He's the brother of BYU defensive end Ice Moa. I'm expecting him to be added as a walk-on to the roster as well. Once fall camp opens up, I've been told that he's down in Provo and getting ready to join the team this fall. That's great. More Moas at BYU, the better. Maybe it helps BYU have the inside track on Celesi Moa, who is going to be, I believe, a sophomore at Weber High and is an electric wide receiver that is in the Moa pipeline. I don't know if it helps, but Sione Moa on the field, another linebacker for Justin Enna to work with. He's a talented player. He played a little bit at Utah State, didn't play spectacularly well, but he's got the talent, he's got the tools. He just needs some time and coaching. I wouldn't expect a ton from a contribution standpoint this year, but maybe a special teams guy this year, and he works his way into playing time in the future. Another guy that BYU will likely add to the roster, there's still some maybe consideration of a gray shirt, but I would be very surprised, John Henry Daly. And let's pull this up. John Henry Daly looks like Landry Clark. If you have not seen Friday Night Lights, what are you doing? And if you need to not, or if you don't know who Landry Clark is, then, if you've seen Breaking Bad, if you've seen Game Night, there's a ton of shows here, but Landry Clark, I don't even know the actor's real name, Jesse something, but he's definitely Landry Clark in my heart. And this is what John Henry Daly looks like. I'm sure he's heard that before. From a football perspective, John Henry Daly is far better than Landry Clark was. He is an electric defensive end. When he's in shape, when he's in football shape, not mission shape, John Henry Daly is one of the best pass rushers that has ever come out of the state of Utah. In fact, he may, if he doesn't hold the state record still, he's number 2 in sacks in a single season from his junior year at Lone Peak High. He is dynamic. Stanford wanted him. BYU wanted him. A number of different schools wanted him, but he committed to BYU early and kind of locked down. And he didn't really say much, didn't really do much. He just was quietly a BYU guy. And then more offers came in and trickled in, and he had to kind of rethink things and reaffirm his commitment to BYU. But John Henry Daly and the Daly family, they have been BYU people forever. And John Henry Daly will join his brother Michael Daly on the roster this year. From an expectation standpoint, 0, right, for 2023. Look, he just got home from his mission. This was a picture shared on his brother Michael Daly's Instagram yesterday. So he just got home from his mission. You don't expect guys who have been home from their mission for 24 hours to make a huge contribution on the football field in a little over 2 months. But once he gets his sea legs back underneath him, he shakes off the mission rust. John Henry Daly can slide in where Tyler Batty will leave, and BYU may not even miss a beat at all. In fact, they might take a step forward with John Henry Daly. That's how good of a defensive end and pass rusher he can be. So, to recap what we've said, Simi Moala, right? We've talked about Sam Vanderhart. We've talked about Sione Moa. We've talked about John Henry Daly. This roster's not complete, folks. There's still not maybe the big names out of the transfer portal that BYU is going to add, but there are still a lot of names that will be new faces in the locker room come August when fall camp opens up. It's an exciting time to see what's going on inside of the locker room in Provo because of all of these changes and things. It's a lot to keep track of, but it's setting BYU up nicely for the future as they assimilate into the Big 12 Conference. Thank you so much for joining the show and spending some time with us today. And until next time, give them